welcome to all my fellow technology enthusiasts. Yes, that's you guys, the PC Master Race, because you wouldn't be here unless you were. So today, yes, finally, I get to say the words i9 7900X in the same sentence as review. So yes, I've finally got one. It actually arrived yesterday at 2 o'clock. And oh, my watch needs charging, and it's now 3 o'clock. So I've had 25 hours and I've done stock tests, I've done overclock tests, I've done memory tests, I've done all the stuff you would usually expect me to, apart from sleep, because there hasn't been much of that happening. So everyone's going to know about the i9 7900X, but I'm going to kind of just walk through some of the basic sort of stuff so that we can get the bases covered. In case, as someone said in the 7820X review that I've done, if you're interested in that processor as well, you can go and see it on the channel. But someone said they weren't going to watch any of the 10-core 20-thread reviews, and they were going to save their 7900X virginity for me. And I've just had an email. Joys of having a connected watch. Anyway, so yes, the 7900X comes with 10 cores and 20 threads. It's kind of similar to the 6950X that we had in the previous generation, apart from when you really look at it, the naming scheme for this time around is slightly different, because the one that we would say would be the direct replacement for the 6950X is technically called the 7900X, which is the one that we're reviewing today. But the 7960X is actually going to be their 16 core and 32 thread product. Now the weird thing is the 6950X, which was obviously the previous generation one, did come in with a $1,699 price tag, or a suggested retail price, which is what this 7960X is actually going to come with as well. But the 7900X that we've got today, which matches the 10 cores and 20 threads, has a $999 price tag. So that's something that we will cover a little bit more later on. So we've got lots of cores and we've got lots of threads. Something that I didn't give enough attention to in the 7820X review was the fact that we do have a new socket. There's 2066 pins in there rather than 2011, but the cooler mount for both of them are the same. So that means you can use, if you're looking to go and buy yourself a new cooler, what you can do is use anything that supports 2011, because they've got the same screw mounts in that you can use. So I'm actually using in the review, I'm using a Corsair H110i GT, which is their 280mm AIO. And I've got that plumbed in there fine. So you don't need to look for anything with 2066 on it yet, although you will start to see those start to flow through. We'll talk about temps a little bit more in a bit. I'm also using the X299 from Asus to do all of my CPU reviews, but we will be doing dedicated motherboards later. The A's for me, the Prime, it's a nice starting point, and that gives me some really good ground and some really good meat to see what the boards, which I normally review the ones that end up being slightly higher up in the ranges. Like, for argument's sake, I've got back here the Tough and the Prime Deluxe, but I've got the X299 Gaming Pro Carbon there from MSI. I've also got the Gigabyte Gaming 7 here, so I've got lots of motherboards here already. I've got the Strix coming as well, so there's lots of stuff that you're going to get coming over the next couple of weeks. But with this board, it gives us a really nice, good grounding point. Now, something I will say is I tested the 7820X on the 0401 BIOS, but we've had an update to 0501, and this has made some pretty big changes with the memory. But what I want to do is I want to talk to you about the overclocking with this and temperatures and all that sort of stuff. So it comes with a staged boost, where if you load up all the cores, you'll get 4 gigahertz basically, but then it can flick between a comfortable 4.3 gigahertz and then sometimes it can even push up that little bit further to 4.5, depending on your the way that your motherboard's set up and the way that you tune things and how many cores said programs are using. If you go into the BIOS and turn on match all cores, then the boost past 4 gigahertz won't work anymore. At least it doesn't with the Asus boards. But then what if you have that on, it will sit at 4 gigahertz all the time. Whereas if you have it so that the cores can kind of do what they want, then you'll get them running lower at some times, and then also you'll get them running that little bit quicker at other times. There's something I noticed, and it was a weird couple of benches that I noticed, that sometimes programs don't necessarily put a great deal of load onto something like the CPU. And when the CPU downclocks, so does, if you look in CPU-Z under the memory tab, it's called the NB frequency, which is basically the QPI link on this, and that downclocks as well. Now what I did notice was when it all kind of downclocked itself and it was sat at idle, things like hard drive benchmarks, at least with this BIOS, were taking quite a big hit. So for argument's sake, I run with the M.2 drive, so I'm expecting sort of like fairly big scores, and just by going into the BIOS and stopping that core changing, actually then made my the benchmarks for my memory come right back up to where I was expecting. So it was just something I noticed on the kind of outside edge. I don't know whether this is going to be a common thing, or I don't, that it's just the way it's going to be, or I don't know whether they'll be able to tweak it with BIOS. It's going to be something that I'm going to have to personally keep an eye on though. It also might be something for people to keep an eye on at home. If you buy yourself a lovely Samsung 960, for example, or a Corsair MP500, which is what I've got in the bench rig here, and you don't think that your scores are looking correct. So at stock, and what I've been doing is I have been having mine so all the cores were kind of enabled, so it was sat at that kind of 4 gigahertz mark. Now this is going to keep certain benchmarks happy, but it's also going to give a bit of a negative impact in some of the other benchmarks. But it seems to be the best way to go, because with some of the older reviews that we used to do, a lot of the boards have got a habit of just turning that process on anyway. So I've just kind of kept it with this so that we are running the boost. It's something just to keep in mind anyway. But at stock, the CPU was pulling, or it was requesting 1.109 volts to keep everything in play. I could manually then turn that down to a single volt. So 1.0 volts for 10 cores and 20 threads at 4 gigahertz. And with that, we were kind of hitting high 50s, and you had the odd core that was at like 60 or 61 degrees at that point. Don't forget that's with an AIO as well. Then I started to work my way up. Now I could get a 4.8 gigahertz screenshot, which is kind of sounds epic. With the 8 core that I did before, I was benching at 4.8 and I could get a screenshot for 5. So we've had to come back a little bit. To actually bench this processor though, the best I could do was 4.6 gigahertz. I tried really hard to get 4.7, but the trade-off between the volts that were required and the temps were just a bit nuts. We were literally at 4.7 with 1.29 volts. We were hitting way into the 80s, and a couple of the cores were going into the 90s. Now, if I'd smashed the air conditioning on, what I normally do with the air conditioning, I normally have it at 20 degrees. If I'd have turned it right down so it was practically blowing out frost and blowing into the case, I probably could have benched it at those kind of levels. But it seems a little bit unfair, and it seems a little bit kind of, you're never going to end up doing that at home. So I stayed with my normal 20 degrees and with this. But one of the things I will say with the A is I'm not 100% sure whether, because it might be a power thing. I've got a funny feeling that when I start running the X299 Deluxe or the Tough or the Strix or one of the other higher end boards, I've got a sneaking suspicion I might be able to push them a little bit more. I'd like to think I would anyway, but I don't particularly know, because one of the things I did notice is don't think that it's got coil whine, but like if I went into a total silent state, then I could hear electrical noise coming from the board. You would never hear that in normal sort of stuff, but I'm that idiot that, you know, goes looking for it. I also did notice that, especially when it was overclocked, that the MOSFET heatsink on the top did get quite warm as well. So it could just be early BIOS. It could just be that it's not kind of built for absolutely raging a 10-core processor. Only really time is going to tell. We may be able to, you know, kind of like change and switch around and stuff, but I wouldn't think that you'd end up buying the A if you were going to go and spend $1,000 on the processor anyway. But, you know, as we start to review the other boards and all that sort of stuff, if you're watching this review in 3 months after launch and you're looking for a board, go and watch my other board reviews, and you'll be able to see if I've got better scores out of it. The other thing to do is keep an eye on the OC3D website as well. You can easily go to the top and click through and go and find the board that sounds like it's going to be the best option for you. But like I said, I don't know whether it's quality of the power delivery on this, or I don't know whether it's just early BIOS glitches, but it did seem to feel a bit, you know, kind of a bit struggle, a bit, not necessarily restricted, but it seemed to be a little bit harder work than it should have been. But when it came to the memory, it kind of it came into its own then. The new BIOS has made a massive difference because last time the memory speeds that I got out of the 3600 were actually really close to what we were getting with the 3200, but we did notice that the board seemed to favour the Corsair LPX memory. What's happened now though is with the 0501 BIOS, it's gone through the roof. Both the 3200 megahertz speeds that we were getting with the Corsair have done, we got a nice boost on those, but the 3600 has gone, quite frankly, monkey poo. I could have said it with 8 poo, that would have probably made more sense, but you get the kind of thing that I'm trying not to say. Anyway, when we bring the graph up for you to have a look, you can have a look at the 7820 stuff there quite easily, but you can also see that the 7900X has jumped right to the top. The most important thing to bring up here, really, when you look at it, is you can see that the processors that are above the 6950X are pretty much the new Basin Full stroke X299 stuff. X265, this obviously loves cores, but it also loves a bit of clocking as well, but it mainly favours cores. And you can see here that we've got the thing to kind of consider is the 7820 overclock, X overclock in this graph is at 4.8, and then the 7900 here, especially with the stock, would have been at 4 gigahertz, and then the one above it would have been at 4.6. So you can actually see when it comes to threads and cores with this program specifically, you can see that you need to overclock your 8-core processor to keep up with a stock 10-core. And this is going to probably work well with most of the other programs like image processing and GIMP and Handbrake and all that sort of stuff. They're going to probably end up responding as the X265 benchmark has done. Cinebench, again here you can see it's jumped to the top, but clear with this one, where we've been running this benchmark for quite a while, we have the 6950X in the graph, and you can see that it has pushed past the 6950X. OpenGL, not so much, but you can see at the top that you've got a nice big gap. Now the 6950X overclock would have been 4.4 gigahertz, and the bump that we've got on the 2 there, I'd say that it's done fairly well. If you have a look, the 7900 stock has probably got the same sort of gap as you've got between the 6950X overclock and the 7900X overclock. So I think that it's done relatively well there, and again it does show the point that cores with something like this is making a big difference. I'm not going to talk about further down the graph because, to be honest with you, I'm thinking about this as being more a 6950X competition in like a like-for-like sense. Cinebench R15. Now this is the single cord one, but what you can see here is because it's single cord, the 7820X goes slightly further up because it had a higher clock speed, so you don't get those core benefits, and it all comes down to the speed of the CPU itself. 3D Mark, this was a bit of a weird one because it didn't do as well as I was kind of expecting with 3D Mark. Now you may say, why didn't it do as well as you'd expect? Well, normally with 3D Mark it loves cores, and it just does well with all those sorts of speeds. And normally this will benefit from an overclocking cores more than gaming will. But when we do flick through to gaming, the 7900X actually managed to do very well, to the point where it's the first time where we've actually had some serious 7700K competition for a long time. So I think it's done really well to pull through with that. You might be thinking to yourself, why are you talking about the 6950X so much? Well, to be honest with you, with the 6950X, that was the last one, and that's the closest 10-core, 20-thread competition. Yes, we are going to have a lot of arguments about price versus performance, because there are going to be, you can talk about Ryzen and you can just say that Ryzen is going to be better, but but better kind of maybe value for money. But the problem that I would say is, if you're just here to say that Ryzen is cheaper, okay, we've covered that. We're just going to put it to one side now. Now the Intel stuff is mental expensive. Yes, I agree, £1,000 is a lot of money, but I can't help thinking that £1,000 is a lot of money, but they did charge £1,700 plus for the last 10 core. So this one, they have actually dropped the price quite a bit. And if you were to spend the same amount of money as last time, when it eventually does come out, you're going to end up with 16 cores and 32 threads. Now there is obviously the old adage of, oh, they're just adding more cores. Well, you know, quite a lot of people have been adding more cores recently, and that does just seem to be the way it's going. Now, so I can't help but think, Goldilocks product, that sort of thing, it is cheaper than the 6950X, and it is quicker than the 6950X. So they are the positive points that we can bring out of this. But then when we bring it round, and there is a fair bit of balance, the X299 motherboards are expensive, although one of the things we do need to keep in mind, when I know people are now throwing daggers at the screen and launching their bow and arrows at the screen because they think I'm favouring Intel, what you do need to remember is we don't know how much Threadripper or any of that stuff is going to cost yet. So essentially what I'm trying to do is focus on the information that we have now, rather than trying to tell you to wait and stuff about products that we don't even know yet. What we will do is we will talk about those products in depth when I do review them, because I think that's the fair thing to do. Otherwise we could be talking about things like Coffee Lake and stuff as well. So if you want to bring products from AMD that aren't out yet, you can also bring those other products in, and it just kind of gets all a bit messy. I understand there are a lot of people out there that are very passionate about the support and the defense for AMD, and I am not dissing them at all, and that's a specific reason why I left all my Ryzen stuff up in the background. I'm just trying to review this product here now, and I don't think you would be, if you were someone that is actually considering the 7900X, then you've got a fair idea of what you need and what you want from your system anyway. I'm trying to get away from the people that are just, like I said, I understand, well, there's a lot of you out there that are trying to defend AMD and stuff like that, but best way I can put it right now is everyone going on about Wallet Ripper and all that kind of stuff. It's getting kind of boring. I do agree to a point, but seeing it on every video and all of that sort of stuff, I'm bored of the fanboy wars already. Do you know what I mean? Everyone has some valid points. Let's just learn that, you know, sometimes certain people want different things. Sometimes people don't have a massive amount of money to spend, and you need to try and go for bang for buck. And this clearly isn't going to be bang for buck. But if you come to me and you say, right, Tom, I don't care how much a cooling's going to end up costing me, I don't care how much this is going to cost, and I don't care about this, I just want the fastest thing in my rig because it's what I want as an enthusiast, and I want to be able to say I've got this, and I want to know that I can do that, and I want to be able to play and tweak and all that kind of stuff. Well, at this present moment in time, in a lot of the graphs, because some of them, where I did the 8-core, the 7820X before, some of them might be kind of swayed towards the 8 because you can overclock that one better. But if you're looking for a whole massive load of cores that you can load up for your 3D rendering and all that sort of stuff, and you want to overclock and all that sort of well, and you really do want to have a play, then there is no getting past the fact that this is it is quicker than the 6950X, which was the previous kind of top of my graphs. And the other really weird and annoying thing really is it has done quite well in the gaming, but you're not going to buy this processor just for gaming, and I wouldn't tell you to just buy this processor just for gaming, because the 7700K is so close just behind, it's not worth paying 3 times the amount of money you know, to get onto this. And I don't think there's enough that this brings to the table, even as an entire platform, to make you want to switch from something like the 7700K with a decent 270 board. So temps were a bit kind of iffy once you pushed past that 1.2 volt mark. I ended up with 1.235 and it was okay because I've got decent cooling and the room wasn't too warm. But if you were someone, you know, average at home in the weather that we've had recently in the UK, where it has been really warm, you would probably want dedicated water cooling, or maybe a 360mm AIO to be able to keep it in check. So that's something that you also need to keep as well. If you're in a loft and your room's always warm, or you're in a hot country, that sort of stuff, you're going to have to spend a lot of money on cooling. But something that I can't stress enough is when I say spending a lot of money on cooling, the problem is where it's not soldered and there's thermal paste between, you've got the metal bit on top of the CPU and then you have this CPU die underneath, and then there's thermal paste between the two to help the heat transfer. Well, it used to be soldered and that was much better. Now you can de-lid, so you can take the metal bit off the top, put liquid metal on, reseal them back up, and you can drop your temps by 20 to 30 degrees doing that, but it's quite scary and it will void your warranty. It's a proper enthusiast thing to do. I do know, because I have spoken to overclockers, they do have a de-lid tool for 2066 in the works at the moment, and I'm hoping to get my hands on an early one because I'm interested in having a play to see whether it does make a big amount of difference. But if you're really wanting to push your clocks and all of that sort of stuff, it's definitely something that I would suggest, if you're that way inclined, that you consider. So yeah, you could end up buying a £1,000 processor and then voiding your warranty within a week the day that you build it. So scary stuff. And I know there are a lot of people out there that are just going to be, you know, face palming and stuff. And yes, I agree, it is nuts. I do think they should have soldered it. I don't know why they haven't. I have asked the question though. So the long and short of it is mental money. But it is really quick. I would say that I was expecting a little bit more overclocking than I did. I did hope I was going to go from the 4.4 with the 6950X up to something like 4.8, and then the really good ones were going to be hitting the 5 mark. But we kind of need to realise this is Skylake X and not KB Lake X. So with the Skylake processors, we were getting, you know, we were looking at 4.7 to 4.8 with a 4-core product. So we've got 10 of them now running at 4.6. So it does kind of balance out fairly well. So you're all wondering if I am going to give it an award, and I'm going to give it the Enthusiast Award, because you would have to be an enthusiast. And I know a lot of you out there are going to be saying you'd also have to have lost your marbles or like severed your spinal cord or something like that to want to spend £1,000 on something like this. And it is a lot of money, but it depends what you want to do with it. If you are just going to game on it and you think that it's going to make your FPS slaying and shooting better and your Counter-Strike kills are going to go through the roof, I think you're probably going to be a bit disappointed. Those of you out there that have got this much money to spend, I would genuinely say to you, and you're just going to game on it, think about something like the 7700K or maybe even a Ryzen processor. But if you do get Ryzen, you are going to have to overclock it. Maybe look at one of those and then spend more money on your graphics, because your graphics and probably your monitor and like the rest of your setup is going to make more of a difference to that sort of stuff. But if you're one of those people out there that does 3D rendering or, you know, like loads of video editing like me, or, you know, loads of Photoshop with loads of layers, really core intensive stuff, then this is going to serve you well, but it's also not going to embarrass you in the 3D benchmark sort of stuff as well. I literally pooed my pants when the door opened then. But anyway, so there's a bit of balance there. It could be good for some. It really depends on how much money you've got to spend, but if it's just gaming, it's just another one where it's kind of like, you don't really need to. It kind of reviewed itself. I hope I've given you enough information on memory, temps, BIOS, how you can set your BIOS up, the overclocking kind of expectations, the fact that it's exactly the same as the 2011 mount for your cooling, and all of that sort of stuff. I hope I've given you enough information. I am now going to go and edit this video and get it rendered so I can get it to you as quick as possible, because the quicker I get it to you, the quicker I can go to bed. So this has been Tiny Tom Logan with another video for you out. Ding!